Hey guys, Sneaky Snake here, Brothers in Arms, World of Warships, and today's video we're going to take a look at a replay that was sent in by GB for our match analysis series. He's playing by himself in the Musashi, the Tier 9 premium Japanese battleship, and he's playing some domination here on the map, Islands of Ice. So our next installment in our match analysis replay series is going to feature a Musashi game that I'd say about 80% of it is good, and the 20% of it that is not so good, obviously I'm going to point those things out, but I'm also going to make sure that all of the good play that is made is mentioned as well, because it's important for you guys to know not only the mistakes that I think that you made, but also the very good things that you did do during the course of the battle. So this replay that you're going to see here is going to have some pretty impressive stats at the end. He's going to pick up quite a few medals, and his team is going to be led to victory. I'd say a good bit of it because of GB's positioning and his ability to deal damage to enemy ships. And let's be honest, that's what the Musashi and her sister ship at Tier 10, the Yamato, are great, arguably the best at doing. These battleships have the biggest and baddest guns in the game, and they are capable of inflicting some serious punishment on any enemy ship that your guns shoot at. Obviously, these 18.1-inch caliber rifles have ridiculous penetration. They deal a lot of alpha damage. For the most part, especially on the Yamato, it's a very accurate gun platform. The Musashi, because it's at Tier 9, it does suffer a little bit in the Sigma department, and you're going to see a few salvos that go downrange during this game that are a little bit suspect. But overall, the Musashi, just because it has these 18.1-inch guns, commands, or should command, the same kind of respect that the Yamato has, because this ship is still capable of wiping you off the board really, really quickly. So here at the beginning of the game, he's going to go over to where his team has, at least it would appear, to be the ship advantage. There are two destroyers going to A, and a Harikaze and a Khabarovsk. Then there's a collection of cruisers, Baltimore, and Moskva, and then an Alabama, a Yamato, and himself in the Musashi. So 8 out of his 12 ships on his team are making their way over towards the western side of the map. So clearly, he's going to go over here and try to deal some damage to the enemy team. And, of course, which is it's going to benefit him throughout the course of this replay, the enemy team is also going to make a heavy push onto the A-cap as well. You can see an Otago and an Alsace have been spotted, or at least they were previously spotted and now picked up again. There's also a Stalingrad, there's a Yamato, there's obviously something on the A-cap, i.e. one of the 3 enemy destroyers. And then another Yamato is actually going to appear here not too long as well. So there's plenty of things to shoot at, and a Moskva. So there are plenty of ships to shoot at, and when you get this kind of situation in random battles where 2 main groups go after the same cap, at that point a lot of it comes down to player skill, and a lot of it comes down to being able to focus fire effectively and really put the pain on enemy ships that get caught out of position. So what he's going to do here, GB, is he's going to get into a nice kiting position. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Sneaky Snake, why did he already turn away from the A-cap like this? Well, what he's going to do is do something that I see a lot of the better battleship players do, and that is, of course, get into a kiting position. The Yamato has excellent gun angles over the rear of the ship, and also being at this kind of long range, at least for high-tier shooting, you know, all these targets are 17-plus kilometers away. You know, when you're this far away, one, you can get undetected like he did there, so he can stealth up when needed. And another thing is that since he's in a, you know, a stern-on position, if the enemy team does push heavily through it, he already has his nose forward, and he'll be able to get out of dodge really quickly. Now, this salvo that he gets right here on the Moskva, incredibly lucky. 1 ricochet and 3 critadels right on through the A turret barbette on that Tier 10 Soviet light cruiser. Oh my god, heavy cruiser. Yeah, that kind of accuracy was pretty insane for Musashi standards. The angle that Moskva was at, if he was turned a little bit to his right, maybe not even 5 degrees more, all of those shells would have ricocheted. So GB definitely got a little bit lucky, but his aim was true, so as long as you get really good RNG when your aim is true, you can deliver those really meaty salvos. So part of it was RNG, sure, but that was a very good aim on a target that was actually moving forward at a much lower rate of speed than full speed, and sometimes those shots are a little bit hard to judge. So GB, that was a very A very good salvo, equal parts luck, equal parts skill, in my opinion. And that Moskva is certainly feeling the pressure now because he is cut out of position a little bit. You can see that some other friends on his team, seeing that he took that massive hit, are now focus firing on that guy. And like I said, this is what happens when you have two big groups that come next to each other. Whatever ship gets out of position, caught out of position, you need to punish them so you can get the numbers in your favor. However, you can see that the enemy team is actually pushed up to a point where his friends have had to move away from the A cap. The Hirakazi is off the cap. The enemy team has since controlled the A and the B cap as well. And with the frag on one of his team's friendly cruisers, and now another cruiser in the Moskva, they're down already 269 to 508, and we're just over 5 minutes into the game. So it's already kind of in panic time for his friendly team, simply because they are already at a significant point disadvantage. And now you can see that two of his friends that came over here, two of the cruisers, are dead. So the enemy team is going to really be able to push through here, and the only battleships that are over here at the moment is the friendly Alabama and GB himself. Now there is a friendly Yamato coming back from the B6 grid square, but it's going to take a little bit for him to get over here into effective combat range, and you can see that GB is taking a lot of focus fire right now. So in this situation, when you have multiple ships, especially a couple Yamatos, there's a Stalingrad, you can see that he's eating a lot of damage here. He's on fire on the front of the ship. He's taking some armor piercing. Fortunately, he's angled just enough to where those Yamatos would not be able to punish him consistently. But this kind of situation that he's in requires him to start moving away. And you can see that he is going forward now because those enemy ships are getting a little bit too close for comfort. But also there's enemy torpedoes that are coming in from one of the destroyers. It looks like the Kagero that's in the B cap. So, you know, he also has to change his position, but what he does right here is something that I really like. He has to turn more broadside to those enemy ships to try and find a lane in between those torpedoes to angle, but he's not going at full speed. Making a play on the torpedoes at less than full speed, you know, if those enemy ships were to shoot at him, he's not moving at a consistent course and speed, so it is a lot more difficult to make those shots count. Now, you can see that Stalingrad that shot at him was ready for him to finally slow down, and he does eat a little bit of damage here as the enemy team finally focuses on him. But when you're dodging torpedoes and you have to flash your broadside to ships that are, you know, in your general vicinity, what you really need to do, cut the speed, try to do everything that you can to change not just the course but also the speed, and it'll give you the best chance to be able to dodge torpedo attack. Now right there, he did eat a little bit too much damage in my opinion because he was also trying to focus on the Moskva while he was trying to dodge the torpedoes, and he flashed his broadside just enough to eat quite a bit of penetration damage. I don't think he took any citadels, but he did eat quite a bit of penetration damage, and he's down to 38,000 hit points. But again, because he's in a position where his stern has been more or less facing the enemy fleet that's advancing upon him, as you can see that they're all now firmly in the southern part of the A cap as he picks up the frag with two nice penetrations on the Moskva. You can see that he is still in a good position. If these enemy ships really want him dead, they are going to have to push through the A cap very fast to try and close the distance to him. Now you can see that his friendly Yamato that's just off to the northwest of his position is now moving down south, which is nice. And again, he's just going to heal up. The enemy team is not focusing on him at the moment. He's just going to heal up and shoot at whatever enemy ship is providing the best chance to deal damage. Now you can see that his friendly team on the other side have actually been able to take care of the C cap, and now they're making a play on the B cap as well. And again, once more, GB here was in a position until the Jutland came around the corner where he was far enough away from the enemy fleet that when the 20-second debuff went after he shot, he was able to get undetected at his own choosing. And now this Jutland is actually going to smoke up here, so he will be able to get undetected once again because all of the other enemy battleships are not within range as soon as this. There we go. So now the 20-second debuff is down, and like I said, even at the high tiers, you know, these battleships, a lot of them have 13 and a half kilometers of concealment. You can still play the concealment game as long as you compartmentalize the fact that medium range at high tiers is, quite frankly, anywhere from 13 to, you know, maybe 18, 19 kilometers. So you could still play the concealment game if you do that correctly. Now, he's up to 113,000 points of damage with 1 kill and 4 citadels, so he's done a pretty good job of stalling this enemy advance as much as he can. The enemy team is being very lethargic, however. They've really spent a lot of time in the A-cap, and we'll see if this comes back to bite them in the butt. Now, that enemy Yamato right there, Barbarossa, is providing too much of a broadside here, but you can see that his aiming point, that center part of the reticle, was just below the waterline. Now, what you're going to see here is some of the shells that go short obviously land in the water, and then some of the shells that actually go right where the horizontal aiming point would have been did not manage to hit the barbette, because what he needed to do is aim up a little bit higher to have a chance. So you can see where he's aiming now. He's not aiming just below the waterline, but now he's actually aiming right up on to the midsection of the hull. And you're going to see with this next salvo, even though he's not going to deal too much damage, you're going to have a lot more shells that land on target, or that at least have the chance to land on target, 3 out of 9 as the guy turned in. And I was talking to my friend the other day on a quick side note about aiming in World of Warships and the fine nuances of it. And, you know, at these kinds of ranges, 11, 12, 13, 14 kilometers at high tier, when you're in a battleship, you really need to be able to make enemy ships get punished at these kinds of ranges. There's really no excuse at these ranges to not really be able to throw some meaty salvos in to enemy ships. Now you can see that his buddy somehow bounced a couple shells off the side of the Yamato's belt armor. I'm not really sure how he was able to tank those, but GB's next salvo going down range, going to get a few hits up into the superstructure, and he manages 6,300 damage. Now he's starting to get focused, and if you haven't noticed, it's beating a dead horse here, but every time he starts to get focused really hard, he starts to move away, and again, since he's in the kiting position, he is able to get up to speed relatively quickly, at least for a battleship, and, you know, he's doing a really good job. He started out around the grid square D4, maybe D5, and now he's just slowly moved to the north over the last 6 to 7 minutes. He's getting some shots downrange at the Stalingrad. He judges the Stalingrad's movement pretty good, but unfortunately he aimed just a little bit too low, and once again you had the majority of the salvo fall just short of the waterline. When you're aiming at long range, guys, and GB, if this helps you out, that's great. When you're aiming at long range, even on ships that are moving a little bit slower than normal, or even if they're stationary, I don't always aim at the waterline. I always aim a little bit higher, maybe halfway up into the belt armor. And the reason why, like I said, is that when you do get crappy accuracy and you get some shells that really fall short of your center aiming point, those shells still have a chance to hit the waterline, whereas the shells that land where they're supposed to are going to hit right on the belt, and the shells that go high are going to end up in the superstructure. And you're basically having 3 different parts of the ship that your shells can impact, whereas if you aim at the waterline, or maybe just slightly below it, and your salvo is a bit short, you're going to have 2 sets of shells that really don't have any chance to deal any considerable damage, while any shells that go high are the only ones that really have a chance to deal some stuff. Now right there, that was a good salvo on that Stalingrad, aiming up into the superstructure, 2 penetrations, 1 overpen for about 6k. That is a perfectly fine salvo on a ship that is angled like that, and that also has the deck armor to even bounce Musashi and Yamato shells from time to time. He continues to stay in this kiting position. Now he's actually turning his stern almost directly towards the Yamato and the Stalingrad. And here's another good thing that I'd like to point out here. Flamu has mentioned this from time to time on his stream and also on different videos. But what he's doing right here is the Alsace is the furthest ship to his right. So he is putting himself in a position where he, as soon as he starts to move forward and turn a little bit to the left, he's going to have all of his firepower to bear on the ship that is furthest to his right as you're looking at it on screen. The ships that are further to his left have a stern-on Yamato to shoot at. And obviously, that's not going to be a very easy target to hit. So he is dealing consistent damage to this Alsace, and he is angled perfectly fine to all of the other enemy ships that are behind him. As I put it, he's putting the Alsace to his perpendicular, where the Alsace is in a really bad spot and cannot get away from all of his firepower, but all the other enemy ships are not able to deal any consistent or considerable damage to him because he's angled so nicely. And he does manage to get the kill on the Alsace, so now with that threat neutralized, he's now going to make his way and about face, and he's going to go back towards the A cap. You can see that in the meantime, the friendlies over at C have been able to decisively beat down the enemy ships in the vicinity of the B cap. There's a Tirpitz, a Conqueror, a Yamato, and a Stalingrad left on the enemy team. They now have the lead 698 to 632. So GB here is now going to get into a better position to try to get the broadside of these ships at A that have now turned to their right to try and deal with the Yamato and others that are in the vicinity of the B cap. So GB is now in a good position. He has complete freedom of maneuver. He doesn't have to worry about any destroyers potentially creeping up on him and spotting him, and he's far enough away where he can easily go undetected in between each salvo. Now you might be thinking, guys, well, hasn't he kind of camped in the back a little bit too much? Well, if you look at the stat card right now, 178,000 damage, 2 frags on the enemy fleet that was pushing very slowly, albeit, through the A cap, and 2.28 million potential damage. So I'd argue no. He's actually done a very nice job. He's preserved his hit points to a pretty good degree. Now, this is his last heal, to be fair, so he only has 33,900 hit points to work with, but when you're this late in the game and you still have about a third of your HP in a battleship, as long as you're able to get into positions where you're not going to be perma-detected, it's not really that big of a deal. Now, he's got some pretty juicy broadside shots here on the enemy. Stalingrad at 19 kilometers, going to try to toss those shells over the top of that iceberg that's just off to about his 30 degrees on the port side. The shells just barely make it over the top, and kaboom, he gets the Citadel on that Soviet battle cruiser, so he picks up his 3rd frag of the game. So now his team has a pretty commanding lead and a 2-to-1 ship advantage and a score advantage of 841 to 636. However, here at the end of the game, this is where I really want to hit on. And GB, don't take this personal. There's a couple mistakes that I think that you make here at the end of the game that could have really swung the game towards the enemy team's favor. So, as we get to the last 4 minutes of the game here, I'm just going to speak really frankly. I'm going to tell you some things that I wasn't a fan of and how this could have, honestly, helped the enemy team win the game. So he's got a broadside shot here on the enemy Yamato. These couple salvos right here, misjudging the speed of that guy. The Yamato does go to full speed, so those last 2 salvos, this one included, barely register any hits. I think that the one prior to this one didn't hit any shells, and then that, of course, just had 1 over penetration. So a little bit misjudging of the speed on that Yamato. But what you're going to see here, the enemy team is actually going to be able to pull this back pretty impressively. The enemy Conqueror only has 4,000 hit points, but he is going to get his Mong heal up. There we go. And there's an enemy Kitakazi that is kind of stuck in between a Tirpitz that's over there on 3k hit points, but also healing, and the enemy Conqueror. Now you can see that GB continues to shoot at the enemy Yamato. Unfortunately, 5 overpens. He aimed a little bit too high and had a whole bunch of them land in the superstructure, but that's still okay. Still a pretty decent salvo. He's looking to try and get more damage dealt to this guy. However, the Yamato is going to finally realize the threat that GB is posing, so he's now going to angle up towards him, which is the smart play. And he's also bringing all of his firepower to bear on the friendly Zal that's in the C5 grid square kiting away. So that Yamato, I think, is making the good play right here. He's also been able to put that island somewhat in the way. GB is still able to launch salvos now as he goes far enough to the southwest. But that Yamato is not going to be in a decently safe position, because once GB fires this last salvo, assuming that nothing crazy happens and he gets nose citadeled, he's not going to be able to get any more salvos, because now GB is too close to the island here. So with that being the case, as he does get a pretty decent penetration right there, unfortunately the Zao dies. So now that the Zao is dead, the Yamato can focus fully on dealing with GB. And unfortunately the Conqueror manages to kill the Kitakazi, because the Kitakazi, for some inexplicable reason, decided to get close enough to an enemy battleship. So I really have no idea what that guy was thinking. Now GB is going to make a good idea here, and he's going to pop his spot plane so he can see that the Yamato where he's at. But this Yamato knows that he's there because he is detected, and GB is going to come around the corner flashing way too much broadside to this enemy battleship. Absolutely too much. This guy should be shooting right now because GB is providing way too much broadside, and even only with 6 guns he would be able to get citadels at that angle. As I mentioned that, he gets the unfortunate nose citadel from GB as he picks up the 4-goal haul. But to be honest, that's something that you can't count on all the time, even at point-blank range. When an enemy Yamato is at a 30-35 degree angle, shoot at that octagonal barbette and you are guaranteed to get some pretty good damage. But when you go fully bow on like that, that was a little bit lucky. So unfortunately for that Yamato, he gets killed. Now, if he didn't get killed, he would be able to get a pretty decent salvo back at GB. However, now GB, without any heals, obviously can't really use his repair because a Conqueror is shooting at him, but you can also see that an enemy Tirpitz is actually going into the B cap. So what I would do right now is turn hard left and point that island that is just off his port bow in between him and the Conqueror. You can see that the enemy Tirpitz is charging down the Kharbarovsk, so I would want to be helping out my teammate that's over there as much as I can, but for some reason, he continues to go on the same course. Now, the enemy spot plane from the Yamato continues to detect him, so this Conqueror is going to be able to get more high explosive shot downrange as the Tirpitz continues to crawl in at the friendly Kharbarovsk. Like I said, I would have made a hard left turn to put that island that's about 30 degrees off to his left in between him and the Conqueror, because now this Conqueror, all he has to do is hard turn to the left after he shoots his salvo, and he's going to be able to continue to close the distance and spam the high explosive, and GB is not going to be able to do anything about it. You can see that the enemy Tirpitz is going around the corner. I would have shot at the Tirpitz right there. Even if he's on 24,000 hit points, there is an off chance that if all 9 shells hit, he's going to be able to get enough penetrating damage to do so. So now this game is completely dependent upon the Kharbarovsk to land those torpedoes as he gets killed by the Tirpitz's main battery. And fortunately for GB, that's exactly what happens. And there's only 4 seconds left in the game, and as the Conqueror puts him down to 8,000 hit points, the battle ends and his team manages to win. Alrighty guys, taking a look now at the post-battle results, GB managed 952,000 credits received and almost 10k total experience earned. He picked up 4 goal haul, fireproof, dreadnought, and high caliber, dealing 240,000 points of damage off of 87 shell hits and 6 citadels. He managed to sink 4 of the 12 enemy ships. Taking a look at the team score, he finished second on the squad with 2,519 base experience. I'd like to give a shout out to the Yamato that shamelessly charged right into the teeth of the enemy team at the A cap and was able to deal a couple frags and 2,559 base XP. So those two guys were definitely a large part and the reason why they were able to secure the victory. Looking at the detailed report, every lick of damage with the armor-piercing shells from the main battery guns and also 2.6 million potential damage. But I cannot stress it enough. That play where he did not turn to the left to try to put that island between him and the Conqueror, if there was another minute left in the game, his team would have lost because that Conqueror would have been able to burn him and, use the high explosive shells to good effect and just rake his superstructure bow and stern and really kill him off. So I was not a fan of that play whatsoever, and that would have resulted in his team losing the game and also not trying to shoot at the enemy Tirpitz that was coming around the corner. Sure, you can't count on a 24k salvo, but you got to help the friendly teammate out, and it's a good thing that that Kharbarovsk was close enough to deliver an almost inescapable torpedo salvo, whereas if he was a little bit further away, or maybe if the Tirpitz had more hit points, he would have been able to survive that, and his team would have lost the game. So some bad plays, in my opinion, at the very end, but GB was still able to manage a good game and still able to secure the victory for the team. So, thank you guys for watching this, GB. I hope you enjoyed watching the match analysis, and I hope you learned a few things, just, what I was basically thinking, in my opinion, at the time, and hopefully it'll help you improve your BB gameplay going forward. It already seems like you got your aim down, and it already seems like you're a pretty decent player, but I hopefully you take those little things that I mentioned about long-range aiming and, reading the map and what the ships are doing at the very end of the game, and hopefully you'll be able to improve your gameplay a little bit. So this is the Sneaky Snake with BIA World of Warships signing off. Guys and gals, please consider commenting on the video, liking it, subscribing to the channel. All of it is very much appreciated, and have a great day.